the Human Rights Article number 5 and how it's being abused in today's prison systems internationally and with our own state, Nebraska. So, first is our roadmap, and here we'll go over the introduction, which will give an overall description, what Article 5 violations look like, and specific other instances. Then we'll move on to case studies, where we'll look at the description of the event, how this event goes against Article 5, human rights, and human rights defenders. Then we'll conclude with pushes to reform prison systems, long-term effects of torture, and how we can help. So, what does Article 5 mean? Article 5 states, no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. So, we have a history fact. NATO and Article 5 were established in the aftermath of 1949's end of World War II. So, the abuse of Article 5 looks like beating, rapes, prolonged SHU confinement, food rationing, defined and denied medical care, and more. So, it means that these are all the examples that we looked at. All are similar by means of being either abused or having some sort of unusual treatment done by the prison staff. We didn't use any of these examples, but they were good to look over to gather more information on how abusing Article 5 of human rights. And then we have our first case study. So this is the one residing in Nebraska. So a Florida-based inmate discovery group has accused the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services of censorship on at least 6 occasions. Legal books are being withheld from inmates. The group's general, who works for Washington State Department of Corrections, was named in this lawsuit due to the challenging of a similar restriction held in 2003 study of Seattle injunctions. And then we'll move into the rest of first of the case study. The Bureau of Prisons modified regulations of the FSA. The changes made by the BOP would recalculate many of the prison sentences of the inmates and hope to reduce the population in prisons to help the overcrowding issue. So overcrowding is a consequence of the justice policies rather than the rates. It comprises aspects like healthcare, hygiene, mental health, rates of violence, and self-harm, effective rehabilitation, education, and vocal training. So in advocating for Article 5, you're also advocating for intolerance of cruel punishments, no expansion of prison captivity, intolerance towards prison overcrowding, and backdoor policies. What reforms were made? So, on April 6, 2022, a bill in Nebraska failed to pass in Nebraska's unicameral Chamber of Deputies. The bill would have helped with Nebraska's overcrowding issue, which is about 50% over the maximum capacity. The state of Washington ended up paying $100,000 to the Human Rights Defense Center. The state also had to pay $442,000 in attorney fees for violating the center's rights. So our second case study was of January of 2022, marked 20 years of torture at the infamous Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. Years of abuse that are impeding on the rights of the victims or damaging the protection of the universal human rights for peoples around the world. The U.S. has also secretly detained around 120 Muslim men and tortured about 40. The U.S. military currently has 39 Muslim men still being detained. In a study shown from March 27, 2022, it appears to show the Ukrainian forces capturing Russian fighters and shooting them in the legs, putting bags over their heads, being beaten, and enduring other abuses. The Third Geneva Convention states that the treatment of prisoners of war should be humanely as an obligation of human rights. So, what reforms were made? Reforms should include far greater transparency about crimes that the U.S. forces committed and accountability at the highest levels, as well as robust efforts to address religious, racial, and ethnic bias and counterterrorism efforts. Because of recent investigations taking place in early March, there have yet to be any reforms to take place. All this given information is provided to us through the military, journalists, persons, and other parties. The events going on right now in Ukraine is an example of what Time magazine describes as our past and our future. Long-term effects of torture. The effects of tortures can be many different aspects, with the effects mainly depend on physical trauma, headaches, scars, hearing loss, muscular spasms, visual problems, or neurological damage, cardiovascular issues, and respiratory issues. And then physical trauma. But is this justice? And then here is a little like pamphlet of or a graphic of different and interesting facts about the prison system. And then what can we do to help? So, first, tell your story. If you know someone who has been in the prison system before, share their story. Reach out to them. Get it out there so people know and they can talk more about it. Second, donate your signature. There's lots of petitions. There's people going around for justice reforms. Three, get involved. You can volunteer, gather signatures, share links, and go on social media.